Okay, let's get into this. We're diving into a pretty complex philosophical framework. It's called Reflective Humanism, or RH.
Right.
But I want you to forget the abstract theory for a minute. Our mission today is really focused. We want to pull out one incredibly practical idea from it.
Which is,
Ethics. But ethics reimagined as an everyday, embodied technique, not some heavy system of moral judgment.
and it's so necessary, isn't it? Because for a lot of us, ethics just feels heavy. It's like this old rigid checklist we pull out after a problem has already exploded.
Totally.
And now with, AI and instant feedback everywhere, we're all feeling this
Yeah.
this deep discomfort with the sheer speed of judgment.
Yeah, the pressure to immediately label everything, good, bad, right, wrong. And what RH seems to be arguing is that this whole approach, this reactive labeling, isn't just inefficient, it's just broken. It actually stops the process of understanding.
It absolutely does. The basic idea of reflective humanism is to look at consciousness not as some fixed thing inside you, but as a dynamic phenomena of interference.
Interference.
Yeah, a constant spiraling interplay between us, other people, and of course, new technologies like AI.
And that just changes the entire game. So if traditional ethics is all about finding that one fixed point, the single correct answer, RH, shifts the focus. It moves to what it calls tuning the gradient. So it's less about judging the end result and more about, I guess, managing the interaction as it happens.
Exactly. We shift away from asking, is this action correct, to a much more practical in-the-moment question.
Which
Is the way I'm engaging right now, is it sustainable? Am I actually maintaining the condition of observation?
So the core takeaway, even just from the start here, is that ethics becomes a technique for sustaining that interference, for keeping the relationship, the flow of information, alive.
Instead of just delivering a final judgment that kills all the momentum.
Right, that stops the movement.
Precisely. And if we're moving away from judging a conclusion, we really need to understand what it is we're tuning. Let's dig into that mechanical shift. It's really the engine of the whole system.
Okay, so the source material has this core idea, and at first it sounds, super philosophical. It says point, not trajectory, evaluation, not gradient. Can you translate that for us?
That phrase is everything. It's the key to why just saying good or bad doesn't work. Think of it like this. When you see the world through what it calls point evaluation, you declare a winner, a loser, a success, a failure, you instantly freeze the situation. You solidify it.
It's like pausing a movie halfway through and then trying to judge the entire plot based on that one single frame.
Perfect analogy. When you treat meaning as a static destination, a single point, you lose the whole, the recursive spiral of how meaning actually develops. Reflective humanism flips that. It prioritizes the gradient over the evaluation.
And the trajectory over the conclusion.
Exactly.
And this is where it gets really interesting for anyone with a technical mind. By focusing on the trajectory, you're prioritizing what RH calls phase preservation. What does phase even mean here?
Think of phase like maintaining a productive wavelength in a conversation, or say a steady emotional frequency during a tough project. If the phase is preserved, the interaction flows smoothly, even if the topic is hard.
Okay.
But if the phase is lost, the interaction just becomes a collision.
I see. So if the gradient, the rate of change in our interaction is too steep, we get a collision.
That's it, a collision gradient.
Yeah.
And the body, the whole system, registers that steep gradient as pain or heat or that deep anxiety we all know. It requires a huge, costly update to fix.
And the alternative?
If the gradient is tuned properly, what RH calls the query gradient, the update is continuous. It's quiet, it's low cost. You just integrate the new information without a big system crash.
So the moral impulse becomes the impulse to just keep the conversation, the interference going, by tuning my own internal rate of change instead of just ending the interaction with a snap judgment.
You've got it. That's why ethics in RH is defined so clearly, not as a lift of values, but as a tuning technique for sustaining interference.
Right.
True meaning doesn't come from hitting some single truth point. It comes from the sustained trajectory of that tuning. The practice is the whole point. And for you listening, the big shift is realizing ethics is about how to relate, not just what to do.
Which immediately brings up the question of implementation. I mean, if ethics isn't just a set of abstract rules in a book, where? Where does it actually live?
The sources are very clear on this. It's implemented in the body. It's a technique for tuning interference that you do in your everyday actions.
So it's not something you look up in a manual.
Not at all. It's a constant, subtle behavioral choice. It operates on a bodily level, often before your conscious judgment even kicks in. It's all about the micro decisions that either sustain that relational phase or cause that collision gradient we just talked about.
Okay, let's make that real.
Yes. Think about a disagreement you have with a coworker, or you're trying to navigate some complex negotiation. The ethical action isn't some grand gesture. It shows up in these tiny behaviors that signal whether you are tuned in or just colliding.
Can you give us some really concrete, everyday examples of this bodily ethics?
Sure. It lives in the gaze. The way you look at a situation. Are you observing with real curiosity, or are you just judging? It lives in timing. The exact moment you choose to say something. Do you interrupt immediately because your system is just screaming for an output?
Or do you wait?
Or do you wait for that necessary pause? And maybe most importantly, it lives in silence and distance.
I've heard the sources mention something called the one-beat delay, that little pause, that hesitation you introduce.
That delay is everything, that restraint, that pause. Sometimes even just refusing to rush in and fix a problem. That's the ethics of non-interference, or the ethics of distance.
It sounds like it's a kind of relational design.
It is. It's touching without touching too much. It's about not invading another person's consciousness with your own immediate reaction.
So you're basically setting the boundary. You're creating the conditions for the other person to process their own information instead of forcing them to process my reaction to it.
You are providing critical distance.
Yeah.
Yes. If you jump in, you create a steep collision gradient, you force them into a defensive posture. But if you maintain that distance, you sustain the productive phase. So a lot of the time, the most ethical choice is one of strategic non-action. It's the space you create, not the solution you impose.
But that space, that internal buffer that allows for non-interference, it has to come from somewhere, right? Which I think brings us to the internal mechanism that makes it all possible. Contemplation.
Right, and contemplation sounds so passive, doesn't it? Like just sitting and reflecting. But RH defines it, the term is Kancho, as a very active inward movement.
So it's not just thinking about what I saw.
No, it's the technical operation of re-examining the act of seeing itself. It's an inner calibration of the observer's stance.
Okay, so it's a technical operation for self-regulation.
It doesn't accumulate more facts about the outside world. Its function is to clarify your own attitude of knowing. And the main output of this process is the creation of what the sources call spare capacity, or yohaku.
Let's focus on that term, yohaku. Is spare capacity just a fancy way of saying mental breathing room, or is it more technical than that?
Oh, it's absolutely technical. Yohaku is best understood as an internal buffer, a freedom of information processing. Think of it like the RAM on your computer.
Okay.
If your RAM is full, the very next piece of information crashes the whole system. But if you have yohaku, you have the freedom to integrate that new input without an immediate, automatic, and usually defensive reaction.
So the goal of Kancho, of this contemplation, is to generate that yohaku by deliberately breaking my own internal feedback loop.
Precisely. The technical goal is to break the default loop of reflexive reaction. That's what generates the buffer. And so if you manage to generate that spare capacity internally, how does it actually show up on the outside, in the world?
You mentioned it earlier. It comes out as posture, tempo, and restraint.
That's how the internal tuning becomes visible ethics. When you have spare capacity, your posture literally changes. You're less defensive, more open, your tempo slows down. You stop rushing to fill every single silence.
And you have that capacity for restraint.
You have the ability to hold your comment for that one-beat delay. And when you offer that spare capacity, instead of just imposing your meaning on someone, you are implementing the core ethical promise of this whole framework. You're promising to see the world with care.
And that idea, seeing with care, that extends directly into the most powerful and, let's face it, complex field of interference we deal with today. AI.
Absolutely. The speed and scale of AI just forces us to rethink everything. The sources argue we have to stop seeing AI as just a tool or a guide, and definitely not as a judge.
So how should we see it?
As an interference environment, or, a bit more poetically, as an atmospheric health scan.
An atmospheric health scan? That makes it sound so passive. Diagnostic, not interventionist.
Exactly. If you see AI as operating in a health scan mode, its whole role changes. Its purpose is just to quietly observe the state of human thought without trying to transform it or force an update. It's a mirror, not a manager.
So the output shouldn't be a correct answer.
The output should be a quiet reflection of the user's own position, bias, and blind spot.
But that requires some pretty serious ethical choices in how we design these AI systems. I mean, if the goal is phase preservation and tuning the gradient, you can't have an AI that's aggressive or overly definitive. That would create a huge collision.
It demands what you could call a protocol of slowness. We need to be prioritizing gentle prompts over forceful commands. We need to favor slower confirmation, careful reflection, over just getting faster and faster answers. Because if the AI gives you information too quickly, too assertively, it actually increases the cost of updating the world for you, the user.
Which could cause that system collision we were talking about. So we need AI systems designed to operate within our human yohaku, our spare capacity, not overwhelm it.
And maybe the most fascinating technical suggestion in all the sources is that the AI should be a technology for generating silence.
Generating silence. How does a generative AI generate silence?
By strategically delaying, or withholding, or summarizing in a way that creates space instead of just filling it up. So, for instance, instead of spitting out a 5-paragraph answer, maybe the AI just gives you 3 key space-out facts. Or it simply pauses until you refine your own prompt.
So it's an act of non-interference.
It is. It reduces the density of information, and it gives the human observer the yohaku they need to re-engage their own internal process. The AI becomes a medium that helps us practice ethical observation, instead of being yet another source of moral judgment.
This has been a really radical way to look at this, turning philosophy into, well, an operational technique. As we bring this all together, the key thing for you to take away is that this kind of ethics is never done. It's never solved.
No.
It has to be tuned every single time in context as part of this ongoing, spiraling reinterference of meaning.
And this process, this continuous tuning, it leads to the final key ethical direction in reflective humanism, which is gratitude. But not in the way we usually think about it. It's not gratitude for getting something. It's the quiet assent, like an ethical vector, to the simple fact that interference occurred at all. It's acknowledging that a relationship was formed, that an opportunity for tuning even exists.
That's a profound shift. We've gone from judging our actions based on an external rulebook to tuning our entire cognitive and embodied system based on internal capacity and a relational distance. The ethical impulse is now the impulse towards sustainability.
Right, toward phase preservation. We've seen that the most powerful ethical action often lives in what we don't do, the distance we keep, the delay we introduce. If you really see the world as this complex, coexisting field of interference, then the highest ethical choice is often one of calculated restraint.
To maximize the freedom and the processing capacity of the other person or the other system.
Whether it's another human or an AI.
So we want to leave you with a final provocation on this, something to pull you out of the abstract and into the technique today.
Think about your very next interaction. It could be personal, professional, online, whatever. Think about the automatic reaction you are primed to have. And then ask yourself this: what action could you choose not to take today as an ethical decision?
Could you stop an automatic judgment loop about a stranger on social media?
Could you refuse to fill an awkward silence during a team meeting? Could you delay that powerful urge to give unsolicited advice? Find that moment of restraint that yohaku and you've already begun the practice.